This is In the Moment. I am your host, Mohammed Ramadan, owner and founder of Ramadan and Associates, a Chicago-based law firm focusing on business and personal injury law. Listen in as we discuss everyday legal topics, a legal podcast made for everyday people, not just lawyers. What's up, everyone? This is Mo Ramadan, and you are listening to In the Moment. And today we have an awesome guest, someone I was looking forward to, and we finally got our scheduling down, someone I'm really excited to have on. Today we have Ahmed Rehab. He is the executive director of CARE Chicago, a longtime civil rights activist, community leader, and renowned speaker, public speaker. Ahmed, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mo. It's a total pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So we got a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of things that I really want to kind of put on your plate and pick your brain on. But, before we get into all of that, one thing I did want to do is, we all know Ahmed Rehab, the leader of CARE and, the public figure. But I want to know about Ahmed the person, which I'm really interested in. And give us just kind of a general background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Because I think that really plays a role in how you view things. So can you just give us a brief rundown of just your background and your history?
Sure. That's a great way to start. And I'll summarize sort of my early life under the title, The Quintessential Outsider, if you will. As it so happened, I was born in Egypt, but we moved to the United Kingdom, to Manchester, where a lot of my love for football, soccer, comes from, and we'll talk about that later in the program. But my father was doing a PhD, so the whole family moved with him, and I spent the formative years in the UK, in Manchester, about 5 years or so, from the age of 6 to 11. And so, in a way, you can say that as I came of age, my Britishness was part of my identity, even though we're not British citizens, but just being in that culture and growing with these friends and having English be your mother tongue, which changed very quickly from by 7, probably English was my mother tongue. But we were outsiders. And this was the 80s. This was before the internet. This was before political correctness. This was when racism was not only out there publicly everywhere, but there wasn't really pushback against it that much. I mean, it was pretty normal for us to wake up in our building and find F you foreigners blazoned in graffiti across the walls. And every time they'd be washed away, there'd be fresh new graffiti the next week. And it was just something that was run of the mill for me.
Was it as diverse then as it is now? I went to London last year. I was taken back at how diverse London was. I was really shocked. So at that point, was it as diverse as it is now, you would say?
It was on its way, but not nearly there. London right now, you're right. It's one of the most diverse cities on the planet.
More than New York, I think.
Oh, yeah. Over 50%, over half the population is non-English.
Yes. I was totally shocked by that.
Yeah. And so Manchester, of course, would always be less diverse than London, but in the 80s, even less so. And we were in a small workers' town. This is the industrial birthplace. This is the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, Manchester.
Oh, wow.
And Salford is one of those mill cities, tiny towns, not so tiny, but smaller towns that are very backwater. So, if you're watching Downton Abbey, we're the servants, we're not the lords. If you're watching upstairs and downstairs, we're the downstairs, right? My father was doing a PhD, and he had his, sort of clique of foreign students from different Arab countries that were doing their PhDs, but most of the neighbors were working class people. And nothing against that, but, the two different cultures kind of clashed a little bit. And nonetheless, I felt very at home, and these were some of the best years of my life. So I found a way to compartmentalize the racism and the foreignness, or the accusation of being foreign, from me feeling a strong sense of belonging. And I think part of it was the school I went to.
Okay.
And my mom, being the Egyptian mom that she is, we started off in the school that we should have gone to, which sucked. And then she took it in her hands to change the entire rules and put us in a parish school, a Catholic school, which were even Protestant kids could not get into that school.
Wow.
And somehow she convinced the headmaster. So we were the only non-Catholic kids in that school. It was a really beautiful school, wonderful experience. So that really changed everything for me, and that became the home part, the friendships I created there, the teachers and the culture of education that was there. I came back a few times and met with them. I'm still friends with a lot of them on Facebook and over the phone. So that was really a good part of that growing up.
Interesting. So at what point did you leave the UK and come to America? And Did you have a British accent when you first came to America?
Oh yeah. I had a strong Manchester accent,
Wow.
and I could probably fake, more royal accent and other accents in the Isles. But my native accent was a strong Manchester
Wow.
accent. Think David Beckham without the squeaky voice.
Okay.
Yeah. Here you have a situation where I'm sort of the minority in the minority. So I'm the Muslim guy in the Catholic school, and Catholics are minority in the United Kingdom. Now, when you're young, you're not thinking along these terms.
Right.
You think wherever you're at is the default. So I thought my school was the English school. And the fights that we had with the Protestant school down the street, I thought they were the minority.
Wow.
But that's the mentality of a child, right? So from there, we came back to Egypt for another 5 years. And that period is the period that gave me my Arabness, brought back the Arabic language, the Egyptian accent and colloquial, and the culture that comes with it, and the sense of belonging. So these were really formative years as well. And then at the age of 15, we came to the United States. And once again, I found myself in a new country, a new continent. So three countries, three continents. And every time you sort of settle in, you're plucked out and you're put into a different environment and you have to resettle. So there was that experience and trying to negotiate that experience, being the quintessential outsider, which
Right.
I mentioned because it really helps me and has helped me in my career as a civil rights activist as I fight for people who feel estranged or maligned or demonized or put out.
You can empathize a lot more.
Absolutely.
Because you've been through that.
And
Yeah.
the bullying that comes with it.
And I've actually, on a smaller scale, I went through that. We grew up, I was born in Jerusalem, came when I was about 3, grew up in the South Side, Marquette Park. And then from there, I didn't go to a school longer than 3 years. We just bounced around and, low income and whatnot. And I hated it as a kid because as soon as you make friends, it's like, boom, we're gone. Now, growing up as an adult, I look back at it and I say, wow, that was a blessing in disguise because now, I lived around so many different people, so many different communities. You can kind of throw me anywhere and I can kind of just maneuver around it. Because I lived around poor white people, rich white people. I've lived around black people. I've lived around Hispanics. I've lived around Middle Eastern. So you don't realize it as a kid, but as you grow up, as you said in your career, it kind of helped you out as far as being able to be almost essentially a chameleon and empathize with different communities.
Absolutely.
So, you come to this country. What made you get into civil rights? Because that wasn't your initial career, correct?
That wasn't at all. That was probably my third change. So just to go back to what you were saying, the cliche, and it is a cliche, but it's also very true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger was very true in my case. Let's just put it less dramatically. What doesn't sink you makes you stronger. There were moments where I felt, I'm going to sink. This is just too much to handle.
Wow.
But you survive those moments, and the experience and the skill set and the character that is built that helps you survive these moments then definitely makes you stronger throughout life. And I think that was the greatest preparation for the career that I would choose later on in life, more than anything else. So to answer your question, I started off being, the typical Arab immigrant kid wanting to get into medicine. And it wasn't because everybody wanted me to, but it was something I sort of felt I wanted to do all my life. But getting closer to it, and I did my whole prerequisites and everything, and just before the MCAT, getting close to it, I felt the lifestyle, not so much the science, which I always liked and appreciated, was good at, but the lifestyle wasn't going to be for me. I always saw myself as a Renaissance man, a man of the world. Not that doctors can't be that, but my impression at the time, and it remains so to this day, that you would commit yourself more than I wanted to a lab or to a hospital or to a clinic or to some room where you're working internally with patients or, whatever it is. So I wanted a job that would be a 9 to 5 because I always felt that my career, I don't want it to be
your life.
My life. Of course, that was completely the opposite of what would happen later. My career would become my life, and there's no such thing as 9 to 5. So from there, I went into engineering, software engineering.
Oh, okay.
Did a master's degree at DePaul and worked at Arthur Andersen, one of the top companies to work at the time. Felt great about myself. I was only 22 or so. Started my own company, computer company, which still exists to this day. Somebody else bought it out. It's now in Ohio. And, felt like, the cool young businessman and successful consultant and was doing really well in the corporate world. And then 9/11 hit. And the amount of debate and the amount of back and forth I would have with people online or in person about Islam, about Muslims, defending my faith, defending my community, became so overwhelming that I felt like I was spending most of my time doing that. And so when the opportunity arose for me to turn that into a career, especially that I was complaining, I was one of those guys who complained about our community leadership and our organizations, and I felt like we weren't doing enough. And part of it was sitting at home having dinner, watching television, and the debate would be between an Islamophobe and a really bad Islamophobe. And these are the two sides, you know?
Right.
And if a Muslim, and there were a few exceptions, you know, but if a Muslim were to be at the table, they would be, you know, with a thick accent, a bit stuttery. They just wouldn't get the cultural aspect of the conversation.
Like your old school uncle on TV, they just plugged from the
heart. You know, they built beautiful organizations, a great work. We stand on their shoulders, but I've always been clear about calling things as they are, because there's no room for BS in this work. You need to put people with the right skill set in the right space, in the right place at the right time, if you want to move forward. You can't be cute about it. So obviously I didn't feel I was that person. I actually didn't like public speaking. I hated it.
Wow.
But I felt like what we had wasn't good enough. So I complained about it. Now somebody put that in my face and said, look, you complain all the time. Why don't you do something about it? And that was the end of it. I tried to do something about it.
And that was your tipping point, basically.
That was my tipping point, yeah.
Interesting. And how did you get to CARE?
So a really good friend of mine, who without him, I probably never would have done this. Yasser Tabara, who's another community activist, long-term community activist, was called in from work he was doing at the Heritage, I forget the name of the organization, the Heartland Alliance, I think it was. He was one of those early attorneys that was working against the special registration that was part of the programming of the Bush administration, that was sort of the beginning of the Islamophobic federal programs that would emerge. So he was working against that, pushing back against that, and helping community members. Now, he was recruited by the board. Sarsour, another important name here, the chairman and founder of the board, recruited him, and then he came to me and said, look, we've done a lot of things together in the past. I believe in your abilities. I believe I can only do this with you. Let's do this together. So I relished the opportunity to work with a close friend that I really respect. Safa I got to know, and he became a mentor, and I really liked him. But the work, the calling, doing something about it really got my juices flowing. So it was an easy decision for me to make.
Nice. So it's kind of a perfect storm at that time.
Absolutely.
9/11, your friend, and all the work. Interesting. Right. So briefly, what if someone that doesn't know anything about CARE, how would you, in a few sentences, describe generally what does CARE do?
We stand up to bullies, man.
Okay.
I mean, and that's the way I saw it, and that's what brought me into it. And going back to my early childhood, bullies were involved. And I can't say I was the badass. I can't say I was the guy that, you know, would put them in their place. But I found a way to be strong and resilient. My sister was the badass. She was kind of, you know, I'd go bring her and she'd pick back on people. But I found a way to be resilient, and I found a way to sort of put the despise that I had for bullying into a social justice mindset that made me stand up for others. Like, it wasn't about me. So if somebody next to me would be bullied, I would stand up, whatever the consequences. So that deep disgust and hate for the idea of someone who thinks they're better or stronger or whatever it is, whatever superlative, that they can put someone else down, makes me angry like nothing else. And so that is why I wanted to get into CARE Chicago and help build CARE Chicago into an anti-bullying platform that would have teeth, bark, and bite. We're not going to kid around. So I was really pulling my sleeves back, and I wasn't waiting to be attacked or waiting to be put down. I was going to, create a list of names and come after people. People that were bullying others, Muslims, African Americans, whatever Arabs, whatever communities that they thought were less than theirs and can be picked on. So that's putting it in very colloquial terms. Now, if you want a little bit more of a professional answer, it's a civil rights organization that has three things in its mission. We work to defend civil rights, fight bigotry, and promote tolerance. And our vision is to, both in the media, in the political circles, in the public, in academia, in all facets of life, project Muslims for their reality. Because all too often, what we're seeing is a false projection rooted in fear, hate, and bigotry.
Okay. And that's a good segue to one question I've always wanted to know and always wanted to ask you. The Muslim communities extremely diverse as far as ethnicity, race, so many different different groups who all have different needs. Yes, we're all Muslim, but the African American Muslim community has different needs than, say, the Desi Muslim community and the Arab Muslim community. And sometimes I feel like you get beat up because if you defend one, well, what about us? And if you defend the other, well, what about us? How do you balance all these ethnic, racial differences within the Muslim umbrella?
So it is very true that we have an incredibly diverse community, and that is part of our strength. It is something that I'm very proud of, and I think all leaders act as servants of the community, whatever term you want to use. looked to as a positive. It does come with challenges, but the challenges are welcome. So let's first, establish that this is a wonderfully positive thing that makes our community more strong, more resilient, and more able to connect with others outside of our community, because we have everybody represented inside the community in that large tent. And Islam was always about that. And that's the beauty of Islam. Anywhere in the world, it was always a large tent community. And I always joke about, back in the day when they would put up some wacko, like, I don't know, a terrorist or something, and say, why do you have this person in your religion? You should excommunicate them. And we don't have excommunication in Islam, So I always say, look, that's the negative side of the positive side. Islam is like this beautiful country club with no walls. Anybody can get in. That's beautiful. But anybody can get in. That's the bad part. So
it's an open door.
That guy's in, I can't boot him out. I can condemn his actions, etc. I can't say he's a non-Muslim unless he professes something different.
Correct.
But back to your question, we're very clear about our mission, right? Our mission from the very beginning. And so I also want to emphasize the professional aspect of the work, because part of the reason why I got into this work is not just for the mission, but for the larger idea of creating a professional culture around Muslim organizations. So there were really two motivations for me. One is the cause, and it could have been anything. It could have been environmental justice. It could have been pushing back against domestic abuse. It could have been anything. It happened to be civil rights, which really mattered to me because of my experience and because of 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. But really the other part, which regardless of what the first part could have been, remained for me, is to build a professional Muslim organization, meaning that we don't depend on volunteers, as beautiful as that is. We get them paid. Not too much, but enough to make it a professional organization where there's accountability. To have a beautiful website. We had one of the better websites in any of the not-for-profit world, and remain to this day. We keep updating it and always stay, set a high bar as far as that goes. The publications we create, the events that we have, the way we communicate with people. To me, I always say we need to compete with the Coca-Colas and the Motorolas in terms of the corporate shine, but with the spirit of Islam and social justice in terms of the not-for-profit aspect of the work. So having said that, we're very clear about mission, because that's professional. I'm not a mini khilafah. Too many of the organizations that came before us functioned, whatever their mission was, as the mini khilafah, meaning anything Islam, anything Muslim they want to handle, they want to deal with. We're clear that's not us. Okay. We are anti-hate, anti-bigotry, and specifically anti-Islamophobia.
Okay.
Meaning that we will stand up and ally with other people when it comes to, say, anti-Mexican sentiment or anti-whatever community sentiment, but they'll lead and we'll follow.
Gotcha.
However, we will lead when it comes to anti-Islamophobia. So now that we've made this clear, we know where we're at, and we know what our priorities are and what our limited resources can go to first. And if we have more time, more resources, we can get into other things, but also other things that affect large aspects of our community, we can definitely be part of alliances in. But we're not going to claim to be leading BLM. We're going to claim strongly, and we're going to work to do that, to stand with BLM and to emphasize BLM, because we have a large chunk of our community who are Muslim. But even if not, it's such an important civil rights issue for all Americans, for all human beings to get behind, that we would do so anyway. But again, it's anti-Islamophobia that is our focus. So our community, which has probably the largest single ethnic group in our community, is African Americans, if you want to call it ethnic, racial. Pakistani, Indian, South Asian in general is another. Arab, whatever goes under that, is another. And then you have, the white converts, and you have some white native Europeans, Bosnians, et cetera, and then you have the Persians and the Turks and others. Right. So that's the large gamut of our community. Obviously, Latinos, too, are very fast-growing, very fast-growing community. But all of them, when it comes to our mission statement, are looked at the same way. You come to us and you have a case of Islamophobia, we deal with you equally. So the diversity doesn't really matter in terms of that component of our work.
I see. Do you feel, and I get a sense that maybe from the outside looking in, when I say you get beat up a lot, I get a sense that different communities feel, well, CARE's not doing enough for my people, or CARE's not doing enough for my people. How do you deal with those complaints? Because I feel like I see that a lot. I hear from, I'm very entrenched with the Arab community. I don't know too much about the other communities. I get that from the Arab communities. Oh, they don't do enough for Syria. They don't do enough for Palestine. I'm like, well, that's not their cause. Well, Jerusalem is a Muslim issue. Why aren't they, freeing Palestine? So, right. I'm being a little facetious on that statement. But I always get a sense that it's just never enough. And I just feel like you get beat up a lot. How do you internalize that and deal with it and wake up every day and keep going?
I think that's a challenge for any and every organization, and I think probably less so for ours than others, for several reasons. A, as an activist in my individual capacity, I will extend myself to many different causes, the Syrian, the Palestinian, BLM, etc., in a way that my organization, which is limited by scope, might not be able to do. And I always retain the right as an individual to go anywhere and everywhere that I want, because that's just my individual freedom. The organization, however, is limited to its scope. Now, nonetheless, in many of those cases, there are intersectional areas. When it comes to the civil rights aspect of BLM, which is the chunk of it, that is an aspect that all of us Americans have a hand in. We've all allowed this structural racism to exist. I can't be here talking about civil rights for anyone and not be involved in that fight for those who have actually led the change for civil rights reform in this country, African Americans specifically, and the leaders and the activists and the people on the street, the unnamed, right, fighters. So that's an easy one. Palestine, etc. Again, in my personal capacity, I'm probably very vociferous, probably very disliked in the Zionist community.
Right.
In the CARE capacity, even they'll come after us because they don't differentiate me from my executive capacity. That's fine. But we will also step up, for example, and we're very careful about scoping. So let's say in 2000, I think it was 2006, during the Lebanon war.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, there were a lot of Americans that were stuck abroad.
Was that Operation Cast Lead, I believe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there wasn't much movement from the State Department to bring them back. So that was angle enough for us because we're domestic.
Gotcha.
So we're civil rights, Islamophobia specifically, and domestic. So when you put those things together, it made sense for us to come after the Civil Rights Department to say, look, our own local community members are stuck in a foreign country, and you're not helping them come. That's a civil rights violation as far as we're concerned. There might be discrimination there as far as we're concerned. And when we led protests, which we did, that was our focus. But of course, when you talk about something like this, you can talk about the larger context. We're not going to shy away from why these people are stuck out there. Well, it's because their country's being rammed by a foreign power that wants to invade and kill and maim. So we will step up and talk about that in the context of our domestic civil rights issue.
Gotcha.
So in that sense, we work very carefully to ensure we're not going to come out willy-nilly and go out into D.C. and become the Palestinian Liberation Organization. We're not going to come out and become the Justice for Syria organization. These organizations exist. So A, it would be stepping on toes. B, we wouldn't have the capacity to do it professionally and effectively, which should matter. And C, we have something else that we're doing that is equally important. So we will find ways to amplify, to ally, to help the cause. In my individual capacity, I'll go out as far as I can. But everybody needs to understand. I think we've done a very good job relative to other organizations that we have the scope. And the more we stick to it, the more powerful and professional we can be. Because guess what? Syrians face Islamophobia. Palestinians face Islamophobia. African Americans face Islamophobia. And these are all our clients. They're all my people.
Right. Yeah, and that was my next question. And I seen you recently made a comment on social media that, hey, I'm allowed to have an opinion. And I think you were getting ridiculed for something stupid. And, your point was, I'm still an individual. And you being the head of CARE, which is a public position, I think you're held to an unfair standard. And I think people want to take your personal, your own personal being out of it just because you're the head of CARE, which I don't agree with. And I think your response was similar to that. So I guess my question is, how do you balance Ahmed Rehab, the ED of CARE, and Ahmed Rehab, the individual person who wants to fight for Syria, Palestine, Kashmir, and every other issue? How do you balance the two? Because you guys are a 501c3, so you got to be extra careful. And then you as a person have your own beliefs. How do you balance those two?
By creating clear delineations between them. So I'm very protective of CARE Chicago, and regardless of what strong position I might have or feel about any issue, I will be the last person to utilize my platform, my CARE Chicago platform, to amplify that position. For example, even with Egypt, the Arab Spring, which I was involved in, as a lot of people know, pushing for democracy in Egypt, I did not at any point use CARE Chicago for any of my positions to amplify those positions, other than if something was already in the media that had to do with civil rights and justice, maybe that can be shared. But there wasn't any press releases or any lobbying or any using of that platform. And I see other organizations, they have leaders that are not specialized in the Arab Spring. They have a position on it, and they'll use it to push that position. That's something I wouldn't do. Nonetheless, in my personal capacity, I was all over the media, right? I was in the streets. I was taking pictures. I was blogging. So doing what I could on an issue that mattered to me. So that delineation is very important. Secondly, I'm pretty strong on the First Amendment issue when it comes to myself and others, but myself included. So I'm going to be the last person to accept your argument that because you like me as a leader at CARE Chicago, because I'm good at fighting Islamophobia, because I put right-wingers in their place, that's all I can do, and that I need to shut up and dribble. Yeah. I ain't going to shut up and dribble. If I have a position on anything, I'm going to let it be known. It's my position. I strongly believe in my First Amendment rights, and regardless of the constitutional protections, the godly privilege and rights afforded to me as a human being to have a position of conscience, which no one can take away from me. The example that you mentioned is a funny one. Somebody actually went so far, but it gives you an indication of how far people can go, to say that I didn't even trash the show. I just simply said I don't like show XYZ, and that person came back and said, you shouldn't say that you don't like show XYZ because a lot of people like it, and this could divide the ummah.
Which I thought was hilarious.
It's hilarious, and it's painful and sad at the same time. It was an older guy, nice guy. He says he's a supporter. I appreciate his support a lot. So I didn't want to fight him on this, but it is definitely just self-evident that this is ridiculous, and that's one extreme example. But there are many examples above that also go in the same direction that I just reject.
I looked at it and I said, I was shocked. I'm like, if you made a comment and say like, worldly issue that's a hot topic, I could say, okay, I can kind of somewhat see, the argument, but it was about a show, and I was taking it. I'm like, guys, he's allowed to be a human being. I mean, and I think, and this is not immune to you. I think a lot of people in positions of power, especially when it comes to ethnic and religious organizations, there's this unfair standard thrust upon the leadership that, yes, you work for the people, but the people don't own you. And I feel that people like you in these positions have this sense from people that, well, we donate to you, we support you. So therefore, in a sense, even though they won't directly say it, they kind of want ownership over you. And I think you fight back on that, and they're not used to that.
Yeah, and honestly, I take it in stride. Like, it really doesn't faze me, and it doesn't shock me or bother me that much, because I love my community very dearly. And even the ones who may disagree with one thing or another, it's never lost upon me that these people are facing unfair scrutiny and discrimination in their everyday lives. And even the guy who doesn't like what I'm doing or saying faces that. I will stand up for that guy because I know what that guy's family looks like. My family looks the same way. So there's that love and empathy with everyone in the community that will never go away, regardless of what they do. They can say whatever they want to say. They can, whatever. But alhamdulillah, I mean, not to claim that I'm in any way an embattled, leader. I have great support in this community, great friends. I could not be where I'm at. CARE Chicago could not be where it's at without the tremendous support of this community. But if we're talking about that small segment of people that see fit to maybe demonize you on an issue that they don't agree with, even those people are my community, and I love them, and I will work for them. So that's very important for me to say. Having said that, I'll take you to task on the position. I believe in objectivity. Every position I take, I'm proud of. I've thought through. I can defend. I can articulate. I can debate. Now, you're welcome, and I have no sense of grandiosity that you should not talk back or you cannot criticize. Criticize all you want, but keep it within the parameters of basic adab. And objectivity just as importantly, because I'm not this adapt police guy. I want to get to a point. I'm genuine about these discussions. So be genuine too and be objective. You're just going to come arms flailing and think that you're a hot shot. I'm going to put you in your place. I don't want to do that. So let's have professional, respectful conversation. And then the sky's the limit. We can go all the way. And maybe you'll convince me.
Right. And speaking of demonizing, I do want to transition into the Dems and then the Sarsour. Before I get to that, I want to make it very clear. The questions I'm about to ask you are political related. CARE is a 501c3, so I'm asking Ahmed in his individual capacity these questions. This is not a CARE response. This is Ahmed Rehab personal response. I'm very, very passionate about this. I identify as an independent. I think the Dems are trash. I'm just going to say it. I think they're full of shit. The way I basically gave an example to my friend is the conservative Republicans are pigs. The DNC are just pigs with lipstick. I just feel they package it a little bit better. But what they did to Linda, and I'm going to make a disclaimer, I'm not always a huge fan of her policies, but I respect her hustle. And I respect that she lives it. And she's, boots on the ground, which most people can't say. She's not a Facebook warrior. She's on the streets warrior. And I highly respect that in her and Tamika and a lot of those women who are on the front lines, getting arrested, fighting for what they believe in, even if I don't necessarily philosophically and politically agree with their viewpoints. And all due respect, Linda is one of us. She's one of our community members. And the way the Dems just outright disrespected her publicly, and then the backhanded slap of we apologize privately, which I thought was total bullshit. I just think we as a community, Muslims, Arabs, I feel we give them a pass. This is just my viewpoint. I feel that we get absolutely nothing. We had nobody on their platform. No Ilhan, no Rashida, no, he's the AG of Minnesota now. I'm drawing a blank. Yes, Keith Ellison, who's a very eloquent speaker. You could have made a little effort to have someone from our community there, and they didn't. So let's just start basic. What was your thoughts of the whole Linda, no voice, no nothing from the DNC?
Pretty angry about it because we've been there before, and it felt to me like an antiquated position.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It was like taking us back to 2004. We're beyond that point. Because back then, it's not that it was any more acceptable back then, but it was expected. It was all-out war on the community, a lot of crap that today would, on its face, be immediately seen by everybody as unfair and unjust and crazy, was back then passable.
It was the norm almost.
It was normal. It was normal to say, for example, there are two hijabis who are in the shot behind Obama. Let's move them because we don't want voters to. We love you, we care about you, but just for now, please, And it wasn't normal to us,
right?
But it was to the public. Like I have a Bill O'Reilly interview that you can see on YouTube, and he asks it like it's a normal thing, and I had to come from that perspective to explain why it's abnormal. See, today in an interview like that, I wouldn't even have to. But back then, I had to start there and then move forward to say it's wrong and here's why it's wrong. So they're taking us back to those times. And I use that example. That's an example from the Democratic Party, the two hijabis. And there were others. I mean, you remember the Dubai World Port?
Yes.
World-class company managing ports, won a certain, I don't know what you call these business, not competition, but...
the bids.
A bid.
Yeah.
Right? And they were denied politically by the Democratic Party because Arabs couldn't be trusted. Now, this is not to say anything about today's Dubai and today's Emirat, which is a nut job kind of place as far as I'm concerned. But regardless, again, just to be objective and honest, how they saw it is more important to me than what Dubai is about. The fact that the Democrats saw it as, they're Arab.
Right.
They can't be here.
They're bad guys.
Yeah, we can't trust them with our security. That came from the liberal political community. So there is such a thing as liberal Islamophobia. And I've been not obsessed, but busy with right-wing Islamophobia because that's the one that's projected itself the most in the last few years. And we've had allies in the democratic and liberal communities and progressive. So, however, it's important to understand that there is such a thing as liberal Islamophobia, and it existed. And as a matter of fact, it existed even earlier than anti-Muslim, right-wing anti-Muslim politics. I mean, in Hollywood, for example, if you look at the early work of CARE, it was busy with Hollywood.
Right.
So a lot of it came from that liberal community. Now, progressives and today's progressives will have nothing to do with this. They'll have none of that, right? They're true allies. They're out there. But there is that old school democratic sort of machine politician that, as you say, is GOP in lipstick.
Yeah.
I mean, you said pig in lipstick, but maybe it's the same thing. And again, I'm speaking in my personal capacity here. Today's GOP party is a pretty pathetic place. Yeah, it's a place that Laura Loomer, a complete nut job that was banned from every social media platform imaginable.
Won her primary
in the GOP in Florida.
And got praise from Trump for it.
This is a woman that was banned by Uber Eats. And I'm not even going to get into Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and what name you. So that party and that mentality, there's some in the Democratic Party who still think that way when it comes to Muslims. Maybe not when it comes to the environment, maybe not when it comes to homosexuality, but when it comes to us, we're like the last space where it's okay to just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
So this made me very angry. And Linda, if, like you said, I mean, you can agree or disagree with some of her policies, but if there's one person we can name that has been true to their values, that has walked the talk, that has been there for other communities, including the Jewish community, including, against anti-Semitism, to be accused lazily, without evidence, as an anti-Semite, and that being used very purposefully as an easy swipe, like once it's said, khalas, you can't deal with it. It's done deal. You're out. No, it's not going to work like that. So there was a huge pushback from the community and allies, including in the Jewish community, mind you, but definitely our Muslim community stepped up to the plate, myself included. I called her that night or texted her that night and we exchanged texts of support. She's someone that should not be discredited based on her Palestinian identity. You can debate her, you can disagree with her on her policies, her ideas. Go ahead, have a debate.
And she'll be open to it too.
But she's not an anti-Semite.
Right.
And they say that just because she's Palestinian and she stands up for Palestinian rights. Now, anybody who knows me, other than Islamophobia and civil rights, the Palestinian cause is very close to my heart, and it's one that I don't mince words about. And some of my harshest language has been used in defense of that file. Why? Because today you cannot be for justice if you're not for the Palestinian cause, because it's the most easy to turn away from. It's the most easy to get on board with the perpetrators of the injustices and turn your back on and get rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. So if you really believe in justice, this is a space where you're going to have to be seen and to stand up. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So she's one of those people that do that, and she was called an anti-Semite for it, for nothing else.
Yeah, and I felt, like you said, it was a cheap shot. And the reason that it really bothered me is, Linda's been on the streets getting the Muslim vote ready for you guys, right? Like, she serves a purpose too. She's not just some loudmouth out there. She's been putting herself on the line, and with even people like myself who are very anti-establishment. I don't believe the Democrats really care for us. And she has to deal with a lot of people in the community like myself who say, no, I'm not going with the Democrats, halli anni, okay, in the Arabic sense,
right.
Because I'm good. Like, I'm not going to keep begging for crumbs, hoping one day we're going to get crumbs. And even with all of that against some of her own community, she's still out there corralling votes for the Democrats. The issue I had with the community is I get a sense that, let's accept these crumbs just to get Trump out of office. And, how do we kind of balance the two of standing up? Now, we do have to get Trump out of office, okay? It's a benefit to our community. There's no doubt. But at what point, like you said, since 2004, we always go through this. At what point does our community say enough is enough to the Democrats?
I'm satisfied with the position we took. We took the right position. We raised hell. We forced a recognition of the issue. The media had to talk about it. Again, back in the day, this would happen in complete silence. Yeah. This happened to me. This happened to other leaders. A simple fax sent to a university from some douchebag, if I can say that on radio, operating from their mom's basement in Florida all the way to California or to Illinois, could get you disinvited, could get you an award rescinded from a politician in your own community that you've worked with. Because at the time, it was lazy Islamophobia. It didn't matter. You were dispensable. You didn't build enough power in the media, online, on the streets, in the voting arena, etc., to matter. All these years, we've been working to change that. And we've been working to expose. And again, those guys who were sending these things, and girls, nobody knew who they were, how they were paid, what they were about. So there was sort of a two-bit process for us. We projected a light on the darkness, on the dark corners of the bowels of the internet where these people were starting these types of conspiracy theories about us, Sharia law, Hamas linked, all that crap, so that they saw and understood that these people are dishonest, are kookish, are nut jobs, and are funded by those who are likewise. And then we projected who we truly are and what our power is and what our worth in this community is. So doing those two things together helped us get to a place where this is no longer possible. So today, when something like this happens and it's a remnant of the past, we then come and sweep up what was left from before. with a strong push. And I feel like that resonated. We're still not there. It might take another 2 or 3 incidents, but we're getting closer to where something like this would automatically be internally flagged. That's where I want to get to.
Gotcha.
Where if some loser, and the person who tweeted this was a loser in the Democratic Party, thinks it's smart to disassociate from Linda that easily and trash her in the process. I mean, you can disassociate with one position, fine. It's a free country. But to trash her in the process and render her delegitimized, for someone to say, wait a second, you can't do that. This is someone in a community that matters to us. And it's a leader that matters to them and to the country in this way. So they start to think twice about it. And I think we've earned that just a little bit more than before our response.
So, and I know you've been vocal about it, and rightfully so. You've also kind of said, look, we still have to be players in this game, regardless of how much we don't like it. Make your pitch to stubborn Arabs like myself who say, you know what, I don't want to vote for Biden. I don't want to vote for Kamala Harris because I don't trust them. I don't think Biden is going to be a good leader. Without saying Trump, make your pitch to a guy like me, and there's plenty that think the way I do. Make your pitch to why we should vote Democratic this election.
Have you ever played a game of Would You Rather?
No.
It's when somebody gives you 2 really
It's like
bad
a truth
options.
or dare almost?
No, I give you 2 really crummy options, and I have fun waiting for you to choose one. And I can get really graphic and really elaborate about the 2 options, and you get to choose one. And you have to choose one. That's the game. And then it's your turn to do the same thing. The point of the game is that you can't say neither, right? Because there is no neither. It's only 2 choices. And so you end up choosing one that isn't as bad as the other. It's kind of like that for those who come with your perspective. I want to remind them that this is a closed question of only 2 answers. It really isn't a third. And technically there is. I mean, you can say I'm going to vote, third party or not vote at all, to which I'll say you've just chosen one of the first 2 options. If you vote third party, that's a vote for Trump. I can prove it to you. Yeah. If you don't vote at all, that's a vote for the incumbent, and I can prove it to you. So in a sense, you've chosen in a way that sounds nice to you, but really, at the end of the day, you've chosen option 1. So I say to people like you and others who might have this position, think very deeply about if you had to have one or the other, which is the one that you'd rather fight, you'd rather have around to reform and change. And for me, that easy answer is the Biden-Kamala, the Democratic Party. So despite everything I've said about my strong reaction to what they did with Linda and other issues that they have, by the way, because it's not just about Muslims and Linda and, how they treated Bernie.
Right.
And I'm a Bernie supporter. How they treated Bernie in 2016 and how we ended up with Clinton, which was the first step towards losing. And now with Biden, God forbid, it might be the same. I have issues with all of that. I have issues with them suppressing the natural progressive growth in the democratic world, in the democratic community in America, for the benefit of machine politicians and lobbyists and corporate money, the same thing that GOP does. I have issues with all of that. But still, I'd rather fight that fight than have to deal with a crazy, kookish individual, It's going to have to be the hair sniffer versus the pea grabber. I'd rather go with the hair sniffer.
Somebody made a very, very, very good selling point to me, and he said, Mo, I agree with everything you said, but think of this way. Which side is going to give us a better chance of fighting for equality for our people? And think about which party is going to allow the platform for us to discuss these issues. And his point was basically, you're not getting to Trump and his people. They're not going to care. They're not going to even listen. At least the Dems, you have somewhat of a platform of, the progressives are growing stronger. They're starting to realize, we can't just sweep the progressives under the rug anymore. And when people like Rashida and Ilhan won by huge numbers, which I was ecstatic about because, a lot of us were worried in the community, with all this dark money coming in. And that really showed us that, they're here to stay. And I think that was a really, really big, seeing not just them winning. If Rashida won by 3%, we might have been a little worried. But she knocked it out the water with all this dark money.
Yeah. And they had a lot of money against them. They had a lot of money poured in against them.
And Ilhan won by, I think, a huge amount. And I think that's waking up the middle, moderate, old school, old body Democrats and saying, shit, we can't get rid of these people. They're here to stay. So I think I'm opening up and softening up a little bit more, hoping that the progressives allow us the platform within the Democratic Party to get to where we need to get to. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And also, never lose sight of the alternative. Because anytime anybody gets into a description of what the problem might be with the Democrats, I always tell them, well, have you considered the alternative? The alternative remains there waiting as the only other option. Right now, we're talking about, and it's not, I want to address people because I know how many in the community might think that, I'm not into identity politics, this white supremacy versus whatever, I don't want to pay more taxes. I don't want the stock market to crash. I have a business. I have this, I have that. We'll adjudicate and negotiate those things on social media and in the streets if we have to, but I don't want to have to deal with being impoverished and dealing with Democrats giving my money away and redistributing it and all that. To them, I say, I want to address them too. It's not just about, white supremacy and immoral behavior of the president, which some people might brush off as whatever. It's not relevant to me. It's also about the economy, because even if you think it's good now, you better believe that the ball is being kicked down the court, that someone's going to pay for whatever advance we have taken on this economy.
100%.
And it's been an advance response. We've printed money, man. Think about that. And put it in circulation
with his name on it.
Yeah. And so that is not a real solution. And trust you me, within no time, we'll be paying back harshly for this advance. And that is something that the Republicans have always done. And that's why you always see a deficit in the budget and growing debt under Republican presidents, spending on the military, just to look good, spending on glory projects just to look good, and using advances that others have to pay for down the line. And that's just not a responsible way to do it. You wouldn't do that in your private life.
No.
And if you did, you'd be in trouble.
Right.
So that's where we're at right now. That's another problem. And it will continue. If this man continues in his position, we'll see more of that. And by the time it's done, I think America will forever be changed if he were to win again, both culturally, along the lines that we all know and have talked about, but also economically, because no economic system can withstand that. We'll no longer be a global superpower. The Chinas of the world, the European Unions of the world, even the Russias of the world are going to step in and fill some of that vacuum.
Let me ask you this, and it's a devil's advocate question. And I think it's, I read this somewhere, and I thought it was very profound. A liberal said, the best thing that ever happened to our country is Trump coming into office. And the reason is it exposed and made people see we are not as advanced racially, economically, as we like to think. That Trump has highlighted all the issues of our country that we've tried to sweep under the rug for so long and paint this picture that we've made so much progress. And I think the visceral reaction to Trump really lit the fire under a lot of people that under a guy like Biden, they might not be as visceral in their response because, again, they're pig with lipstick, so they might have internal racial issues. They're just going to frame it better. So do you buy and I know you're very anti-Trump, so I probably know your answer, but do you buy the argument that Trump being in office forced people to really get boots on the ground, to really fight back, and really expose our country for what it really is?
I would be foolish to personify America's problems in one man. America's racism, structural racism, America's history of, whatever unfair practices have been systemized, etc., in one man. And this one man would not have been president had it not been for many other men and women who think like him, and maybe even worse than him. So to that I say, sure, I can appreciate that argument, that he symbolizes something that allowed the reaction to be stronger, but that even when he wasn't in office, when Obama was in office, there was somebody else that played that role, the Tea Party. And if he is out of office again, trust you me, there'll be another reminder of the fact that we have these issues in America. The real fight, and it isn't between black and white, it isn't between Muslim and Christian, it isn't any of those things, is between, and there is a fight, between those who believe that America is great based on certain identities being dominant. White, Christian, Anglo-Saxon, culture, religion, whatever it is, mindset, being dominant. That alone, that is the reason for its greatness to begin with, and that's the reason for its sustained greatness. And to go back to that, when they say make America great again, that's precisely the dog whistle, is to go back to that dominance, okay? Versus those that say, not that blacks and browns are better, or that we need to replace one with the other, but that, look, it doesn't matter what the hell you are. What matters is what we can produce together. And that's actually what made America great insofar as it was ever great, is the ability to say, look, man, you're from India, you're Hindu, you're great at computer science, go for it. Build up your company. You're a Muslim guy, you're great at this, go for it. Great doctor, great whatever it is, grocery shop owner, build your grocery shops, create your business, make America better as a result of that. You come from this country or that country, a good athlete, here's your chance, here's your scholarship, here's your education. It was about merit. And even those who lacked certain abilities, we could then pool our resources together and take care of them. But it's not just a meritocracy. Now, obviously, we've had racism. We've had all the problems. They've coexisted. But what I'm saying is there are those amongst us that see one component of our reality as the one that matters, and there's the other group that sees the different component as the one that makes great great.
Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. And I think you're correct. There is that superiority issue that a lot of people face. And I think we really have a class issue, too, that I think kind of doesn't get talked about enough. We're a very classist-based society.
Yeah, they're related, aren't they?
They are. And I notice that when I see minorities who then become wealthy, and I see, their view change. I know a lot of Arab Muslims that voted for Trump, strictly off their business. Yeah. Habibi, he's going to lower my taxes. I get tax refunded. Yeah, but, he's not going to let your cousin Ahmed come in from the other country, right? Yeah. So, what benefit are you really getting, and how selfish is that mentality? And I think that's where the class element comes in, especially with minorities. Yes, we strive to become educated, and statistically speaking, our communities are above all national levels in wealth, education, home ownership, you name it. Our communities are above national averages. So we've done well in that aspect. But I feel that, and I'm speaking about our community, but I feel once they get to a certain level of wealth and education, there is some snobbiness that comes in, and they forget the overall fight. Do you see that in your line of work?
100%. And you see that in the Latino community, too. There's been a surprising number of Latinos that are for Trump.
Like Goya is an example of that, right?
Yeah, but even sort of everyday Latinos. Okay. And their mindset is, look, I've made it, I'm here. I'm a naturalized citizen, or I'm a born American. And so the other ones now are the other.
I see.
And I'm part of the in.
I did it the right way, so they should.
Or it's the economy, or whatever it is. So to everybody, in the Muslim community, the Latino community, and other communities, to every average Joe and Mo out there, I want to say this. And it isn't about Republicans or Democrats. It's about, what do you believe makes America great? And to Muslims, I say, and to our allies, we need to not focus on Democrats and Republicans per se. I mean, that might be a tactic, but we can't lose sight of the strategy and the goal. The goal is to get America to be a place where anyone has a right to a full opportunity to make themselves and those around them better, to not be curbed or put down as a result of their name, their color, their religion, any of that. So we talk about this stuff all the time, discrimination, this, and but we still don't believe in it, man. We don't believe in it. There are those who have the full potential, except where money can be made. You want to look at what utopia might look like in America, look at the business world.
Right.
That's where you can have a guy called Sinshai, who just came from India a few years ago, become the CEO of a major company because he's got what it takes to bring the bottom line, the dollars. You see with all these...
It is merit-based for the most part.
Yeah, all these Muslims with the turbans and the beards and the great programmers, and welcome. And here's a big check, come and program. Nobody minds them.
Right.
So we need to get to a point where what matters is what you can contribute for yourself and for others. It isn't your identity or your religion or your color or whatever it is. Because once you... This isn't me being nice. I want people to understand that. I'm not saying let's be nice. I'm saying let's be smart. It's dumb to do it otherwise. And I'll give you an example. If this was your company, and it goes back to what we're talking about, versus your country, would you really run your company that way? Would you say, I want Joe Smith to program this because he's white and he's Christian, even though whatever, Mohammed or Gupta or whoever else is a better programmer and can do it twice as fast for twice as expensive? I mean, would you make that decision and still survive in the business world? That's what's at stake today in this country, is that the world is not going to sit around waiting for us to figure this out.
Right.
Once we drop back on any particular world contest, someone else is going to step up and take that place. Finland is happy to be, better at education than us. Sweden's going to be happy to be better at cell phone development, whatever it is. So let's get our act together. This is a waste of time. This is stupid.
No, I agree with you on all that. And I want to end on kind of a lighter note. There's just so much going on, and there's days I hate to, tune it out, because sometimes I want to tune it out and I say, well, some communities can't tune it out. So I kind of feel, a little bit selfish in that sense, saying, well, I just want to tune out for a couple of days, but I do want to talk about, something a little bit lighter. Your disdain for American football, as you call it. So I call it football, it soccer. You call soccer football and American football. Where's your disdain for American football? Keep in mind, I am a football junkie. I don't care for baseball. I don't watch baseball. I like basketball. I watch some hockey. But I'm the type that flew to London for the Bears game. I've gone to the Hall of Fame for Urlacher's induction. I am a junkie, sort of like you're a soccer junkie. I can't keep up with all the teams you like because there's a million soccer teams in the world in different leagues, and it just gets so confusing to me. But explain your disdain for American football.
Well, first of all, let's be careful with that language, because I might run for office one day. I don't have no disdain for nothing American. I just think one is superior and one is inferior. That doesn't get me far with voters. No. Look, here's the thing. When you talk about football, right, or soccer, you're talking about a global sport. Everybody plays it, and with equal opportunity. You don't need that expensive helmet and those pads and whatever. You don't need to be big and burly. You could be a skinny little kid, barefoot in some, Asian or African or European city, and you'll still be able to play it and enjoy it. And you could be a wealthy kid and have all the opportunities and have the exact same level playing field when you stand opposite the other kid, because that's what it takes. It's a very leveling sport, and it's played by everybody in the world. It's got multiple languages. Whenever I'm into soccer, I'm always into other countries and cultures by design. There's no way to avoid it. That's the beauty of it. The World Cup, the biggest single event in the world. Sporting event, and maybe social event on the planet. Incredible. The lessons you can learn from soccer are lessons you can apply to anything. I always, part of the reason why I developed a strong internship program, it was because I was inspired by the idea of the academy inside soccer clubs, where they build academies to produce the best talent that can then step up into the senior roles of the club, rather than have to pay a lot of money in recruitment costs and bring players that they don't know much about. And it's worked beautifully for us.
Why do you think soccer hasn't caught on in America? And I have a few friends who are just like you, love soccer, played it, coached, who say everything you say. And for the record, I love the World Cup, even though I don't watch soccer much. I just, playing for your country, there's nothing that could replace it. Having people from the poorest of the poor countries to the elites all on one field, where merit matters, the few places in the world where actual merit really matters. Why hasn't it caught on in America? What's your opinion on why it hasn't caught on to...
I'll make it simple, man. 2 words: isolationism and commercialism. And I don't want to knock down American football. I understand why, despite those 2 reasons being the start of why it didn't catch on, that a lot of people like yourself isn't part of that conspiracy of isolationism and commercialism and genuinely likes the sport, because what you've seen from it has built memories for you. You've enjoyed it with your dad, with your brother, whatever it is. I can totally appreciate that. But when you think about it, because there has to be a reason why the entire world but one likes the sport and the rest, and America doesn't. You can't, with soccer, with football, F-U-T-B-O-L, you have 2 halves, 45 minutes each. No interruptions, like sacred ground.
Right.
You watch the damn sport.
No commercials.
Okay? With American football, man, oh man, it's like every other minute. And a lot of talking, the guy's talking. The actual play in the game is like filtered down to almost 10%. And the rest, and what sport, and this drives me nuts, I can never imagine watching a World Cup final and waking up the next morning to discuss the damn commercials in the halftime.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell Brazil and Argentina are going to debate what was the better commercial in a final between them in the World Cup. That is proof enough of the commercialism of that sport that they actually, a lot of people watch for the ads, man. That's insane to me.
My mom does.
A lot of people.
My sister that does not know a rule. She will think a touchdown is a, whatever, but, who's the halftime show? And as a football purist, I agree with you. I hate the commercials. I don't watch them. I watch for the game. I'm a football junkie.
And I can appreciate that. I mean, I want to backtrack a little bit and say, look, it's not so much knocking down American football.
Right.
I will knock down baseball as a sport, but that's a different discussion.
You and me will agree on that.
But American football, I can appreciate. My problem is when people put down soccer more so than if they put up American football.
I see. Yeah, and again, I played it. I never understood how soccer, and like you said, the entire world plays it. And all my friends that love soccer and say, you can't call it the Super Bowl or the world champion. It's not. Soccer's the only one that can call that. And it blows my mind that, a country like America that loves sports. I mean, we love sports, and we never caught on to soccer. And that's actually, I didn't think about that, but that's a very good point about the commercialization. Because they pay billions of dollars for that. I mean, billions.
Absolutely. And again, in America versus, say, the Soviet Union, and I always say this, the Soviet Union, when they're corrupt, it'll be part of the system. Like, they don't care what you think. Mm-hmm. Here's the way it is. In the United States, corruption or things that might not be to your benefit are packaged and sugar-coated so that you choose them. Mm. You want it that way. Right. It isn't forced upon you by Mother America or Mother Russia or whatever. You like it. You want it. Somebody out there thought it was a good idea to make us want to watch commercials, to watch them put their ads and their products in our face. In what world is that normal for me to want to sit down by choice and watch someone push their products in my face during a time in which I want to enjoy sport? Right. And somehow they pulled that wool over our eyes, and it's there. And now everybody's like, oh, yeah, the Super Bowl commercials, which was the best one, every day, the articles next day. I loved that one. I hated that one. That one was funny. That one wasn't. You want entertainment, man, go watch a movie or go on YouTube and pull up an ad and watch it. But why do you have to sort of package football or sport around that? You know what I mean? I got problems with that.
Well, in America, money talks, bullshit walks. That's just how I say it. Ahmed, you were awesome, as amazing as I thought you were going to be. Keep up the great work. But before you head out, just let people know where they can find information about CARE and any lasting messages or anything that you'd like to tell the people.
It was a total pleasure. There's Mo Salah. When we talk about soccer, one of the greats for the Muslim community in the world right now and for football in general. There's Mo Amir, one of my favorite comedians, yes. And now there's Mo Ramadan.
There's an Egyptian singer named Muhammad Ramadan, right?
There is a rapper and actor, Muhammad Ramadan. Yeah, that is correct. He doesn't go by Mo Ramadan though. That's all you.
I was somewhere and someone called me there, and some lady went off. I'm like, I don't even know you. Why are you mad at me? And come to find out, she was talking about the rapper from Egypt. I'm like,
it's pretty popular right now too. But yeah, no, it was a total pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. The website is carechicago.org. CAIR Chicago.org, and you can find anything you need there, including forms you can fill out if you wanted to volunteer or intern, or if you have an issue and you want support from our attorneys. You can find that on there as well as our contact information. The parting message is, look, we're in this together. Islam recognizes our humanity first before it recognizes our religious affiliation. Islam itself, the Quran talks about wajh al-insan, karramallahu wajh al-insan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, has beautified and dignified the face of humans, not just Muslims. So our religion then becomes a platform by which to further lift and uplift this humanity that exists already by virtue of creation. It doesn't give us humanity. That is the inspiration for the work that I do, the Islamic value set. Whatever it is that I'm going to do through my civil rights work, my political work, is to elevate the face of humans, the dignity of human beings. So let's embrace that nature, that culture that we have. Let's not get into the itty-gritty, the tribalism, the tit-for-tat, and let's make a difference along with those in our greater communities in the United States that believe in making a difference for the right reasons.
Awesome. And Ahmed's a great follow on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm sure you're probably on Twitter.
Yeah, we're too old for that.
Yeah, I hate Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, but if you want a good follow on Facebook, Ahmed's a really great follow. His comment section is probably even a little bit better sometimes, so bring your popcorn. I highly suggest you follow him on Facebook. Again, Ahmed, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to move on to my final words in my Minute with Mo. Today I want to speak a little bit generally about originality. And I feel that we are slowly losing being original. I think with social media these days and just nonstop, we always want to see and look at the next person and try to emulate that to try to get more likes and views and whatnot. And America's always been known for originality. We've always been the cool kids. And the originality is what made musicians great. It's the originality that made Muhammad Ali. If Muhammad Ali wanted to be like everyone else, we wouldn't have Muhammad Ali. And I think we need to get back to the essence of being original. I know I faced this when I started marketing my law firm. I did a video and the background music was Kanye West. I'm a big Kanye West fan, and I did the power beat. And I remember lawyers calling me and texting me and saying, "What are you doing? It's unprofessional, blah, blah, blah." And sure enough, I got a great response from actual people. And they realized this is a hip-hop kid. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up with Tupac, Biggie. That was my generation. And I always wanted to show other younger attorneys that you can be who you are, because people will recognize phony. But if you're original, people are going to respect it. And sure enough, other lawyers start to call me years later and say, "Hey, how did you do this and how did you do that?" And I have no problem helping them. But the first thing I always tell them, if you're going to come on and try to be like me, people will smell that from a mile away. Figure out who you are, what you are as a person, and that's the message that you convey to others. So don't worry about likes. Don't worry about retweets and shares and who's going to like it and who's not. I promise you, if you stay true to your essence and stay original, people like originality. They want to see someone that's original. They don't want to see a replica of something else, because when you try to be a replica of something else, people will smell the phoniness, and it's just not going to work. So that's our show for today. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on the next In the Moment.